The title of my talk is about future-proofing young brains. The reason why I decided to talk about this is because apart from the work that was mentioned, I also am an investigator on the National Mental Health Survey of India. And one of the findings that we found was that almost 15% of all Indians had a mental health illness. If you look at the other fuzzy types of mental illness, then the numbers go up to almost 20%, which means that 1 out of 5 people sitting here would have had a brush with mental illness. The problem is worse because we all know that during the pandemic, the rates of mental illness went up very, very strongly, went up almost 30%. And this particular graph that I have brought along to show was work which was done by a group of people called the Mental Health Million Project, who've been following people across 35 countries from 2019 onwards. And what they found was pretty disturbing. What they found was that, yes, rates of mental illness went up during the pandemic, but subsequently, the rates have not fallen. They've plateaued. They've remained static. What does that mean? And why is that happening? They also found something which is very, very disturbing. If you look at the blue line, that is young people between the age of 18 to 24, the rates actually went up much higher in younger people. So younger people, whereas the other people, the 65 plus people like me, did fairly well. And our rates remained fairly stable. Now, what I want to really talk about the fact is that mental illness is actually an illness of the young. Almost 50% of people who develop a mental illness do so before the age of 14. 75% do so before the age of 21. So if anything has to be done, if there has to be any kind of intervention, it is not after the horse has fled the stable. It has to be primary prevention before the illness has begun. So what we are really interested in is looking at risk factors, because there are multiple risk factors, and this particular study that I talked about certain modifiable risk factors for mental illness. One is childhood adversity, which can be trauma, abuse, especially sexual abuse in childhood, substance use, whether it is cigarette smoking, alcohol, cannabis, and the latest substance, which is the screen time, cell phone. This seems to affect young brains very, very much. Negative appraisal of life events, poor social support, physical activity or the lack of physical activity, sedentariness, obesity, and lack of access to resources. Now, why are we really worried about these environmental issues? Very recently, the World Economic Forum looked at some of the future shocks that human beings can expect and some of the global risks that we are going to look for, going to face in our lives. And some of them are very, very interesting. For example, the first major thing on that list is misinformation and disinformation, which comes from social media, extreme weather events because of climate change, societal polarization, where people turn against people because also related to things that are happening in our society. Now, the reason why I am talking about this is that young people are face to face with threats like this every day in their lives. As a neurobiologist, one of the things that I study is how the human brain develops. And initially, the human brain develops according to a genetic program, which is basically the genetic code that is written into us. But very, very soon, the brain program gets modified by experience, which we call experience-dependent development. And these are related to the environmental exposures that one faces from the time one is a fetus in your mother's womb throughout life into senescence. Experiences, therefore, we really need to look at some of the modifiable risk factors. And especially in young people, we need to have a sense of what are the things which will protect our brain as we go along. I already gave you a list of things which are increased vulnerability to future mental illness. Now, let us see whether there are things that we can put in. I mean, as a psychiatrist, my job is to treat people after an illness has happened. But after an illness has happened, I am only treating the consequences of that illness. I'm not able to prevent the problems that young people will go through. And since mental illnesses occur during young age, they also affect people during the most productive period of their lives. So there is a great need to look at preventive care, preventive interventions to prevent mental illnesses from happening. And some of the hints come from work which has been done. I don't know whether some of you have seen this Netflix video called Blue Zones of the Earth, on Blue Zones of the Earth. It's a group of places across the Earth where older people live much longer and much healthier lives. And they seem to have some common strategies which protect them from ill health. And these are their diet, which is plant predominant. They have regular physical activity, which is built into their daily lives. It's not going to the gym, etc. It's about walking to the shop, walking up steps to go to the market, etc. Stress management and relaxation, social networks and family bonds, and a sense of community and purpose are things which keep coming up whenever we look at risk factors for mental illness. These are things that keep coming up. These are the things which seem to go wrong and increase risk for mental illness. So let me end by actually talking about some of these factors and how we can start inculcating remedies to some of these risk factors and how we can go about doing that in our day-to-day life. One is nutrition. Nutrition is very important to the growing brain. And as we have seen from data all over the world, it is important to eat the right kinds of food. I'm not going into details here, but especially with the right kind of micronutrients, things which have proteins, healthy fats, etc. But it is also very, very important to avoid ultra-processed foods, like your pizzas and deep-fried foods, etc. Avoiding brain toxins, avoiding poisons to the brain. And of course, tobacco, alcohol, and other drugs are poisons to the brain, and we need to get people to avoid it or at least delay first use. But we are now learning that there are other toxins, and which is why, excess screen time. A cell phone, and the number of times we check the cell phone, is acting in the same way on the human brain as taking a drug. Now, you will say that it's not possible in today's day and age to avoid a cell phone. It's not possible to avoid screen time, which is true. A lot of our lives depend on it. But can we limit screen time, especially in young people? Can we delay the use of screens, especially in young people? Can we not use an iPad as a nanny for our children? Can we delay that? And that will affect how human brains will develop. The other thing is embedding movement into our day-to-day life. There is so much data which shows that using movement, using exercise, not just to increase your muscles, but to increase your brain power is very important, and there's quite a lot of data accruing from that. Social connection. And that is something that seems to be and seems to have been lost, especially after the pandemic, that we no longer make social connection. Our playgrounds have vanished. So young people no longer play on the field. They are playing games on their machines, or more importantly, they are talking to each other through WhatsApp. And that, my dear young people, is something which has very, very detrimental effects on how one's brain grows. The fifth thing that I wanted to talk about was having a strong purpose of life. And a strong purpose of life, which the Japanese call ikigai, for example, is also very important to a growing brain. And how can you have purpose in life? Have purpose of life by forming social connections through pro-social activities, taking part in activities which are not good only for you, but with other people. Creativity, which talked about a little while earlier. Creativity gives you a sense of self, a sense of purpose, where, again, like a previous speaker, I would like to make this plea to educationists, to governments, that these are things which need to be retained, especially in our educational system, because our educational system has now become about learning a particular subject. It's not about creating the whole individual, and that is so very important for a growing brain. And finally, it is very important to mitigate the effects of early adversity. There will be adversity in people's lives. There is the need to actually recognize early, detect early, and put in interventions. So, most important is talk to people, share, and seek help. I will end there. So these are some of the things which we hope will be able to future-proof our brains, for later life. Thank you very much.